Fresh bread is too good not to have on hand at all times. And if we're being honest, it's really easy to make. So put that sad little store-bought bread loaf back on the shelf. And trust me, you can do better. Today, we'll make something simple, a yeasted, low-knead bread. Just be aware that you're not going to be able to eat this thing for about 3 days. So let's get moving. First things first, here's your recipe. In a medium-sized bowl, we're going to add 400 grams of bread flour, or in the case of what I'm doing here, 350 grams of bread flour and 50 grams of rye, 8 grams of salt, and 3 grams of active dry yeast. Now, if you don't know whether your yeast is any good, go ahead and hold off and put your yeast into about 100 milligrams of your water beforehand and give it about 5 minutes and make sure you see some bubbling. But if you know your yeast is good, go ahead and throw it right into the dry ingredients. You don't need to bloom it unless you don't know whether it's good or not. We're going to whisk that together until homogeneous and then add about 300 grams of lukewarm water. If you had mixed your yeast with about 100 milligrams of water earlier, you'll go ahead and add that in now, plus 200 milligrams of lukewarm water. Finally, add 1/8 of a teaspoon of white vinegar. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have an 1/8 teaspoon, and I don't intend to get one. So just take a 1/4 teaspoon if you have that and eyeball half. Also, you might be wondering, why bother adding so little vinegar anyway? Vinegar, like lime or lemon juice, is an acid, and adding even this small amount will change the pH of your dough, which will aid in a moist crumb and a good rise, so I'm told. Seems to work for me anyway. Okay, back to the dough. So what you'll want to do is become the stand mixer. Form a claw with your hand and just start rotating it around the bowl until you can get all the flour and water incorporated with one another. It should only take about a minute, and if you're like me and you don't love the feeling of dough clinging to your fingers, just stick with it. It'll start to form a slightly cohesive ball, and you'll be able to clean off your dainty little fingers soon. Once the dough is formed, cover the bowl and let it rest for about 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, come back, and if you're lucky like me, your bowl will just magically clean itself in between shots. Pull the dough over itself from all sides, giving it a good stretch, and cover again for another 20 minutes. And you're going to repeat this 2 or 3 times until the dough starts to resemble a loose dough ball, and I mean loose. That word's doing a lot of work in this sentence. The idea here is that we're trying to build up the gluten in the dough before it goes in the fridge for a long cold ferment. So yeah, it's a little annoying that you have to keep coming back and doing this, but it's only 3 times, and there's a lot of other stuff you can do in the 20-30 minutes in between stretching the dough. And you can see as we go along here that the dough is really starting to take shape and come together. It's definitely a lot less shaggy, and it actually looks like it might make some bread now. But don't get too excited. Like I said, you've still got to put this thing in the fridge for quite a little while. So let's do that. Go ahead and cover the bowl in plastic wrap, or this weird awkward cover I have that takes about 20 minutes by itself just to put on, and throw the dough in the fridge for at least a day and up to 3. I really recommend doing up to 3 because it's just going to get better and better. Around 3 hours before baking, pull the dough out of the fridge and let it sit at room temp. After an hour, we can start to handle it. Carefully turn the dough out onto a lightly floured surface, probably more carefully than I am here, and onto a more lightlier floured surface too. Now we're going to form our ball. Fold the sides over one another like this, and then pull the top down and flip this thing over. Now you want to start rotating the dough with your hands like this to form a more taut circular ball. The goal here is to be pulling the dough down into itself as you rotate it. So you can kind of see my hand here dipping beneath the dough as I rotate it. That's what you want. Using a bench or bowl scrape, flip your dough over so the bottom is facing up and gently place it into your mold, which can absolutely just be a towel-lined bowl. For me, I like putting it right under the coils of the broth form to get a more dramatic look when it's baked. And just make sure you've given everything a really good dusting of flour. We do not want this thing to be sticking when we pull the dough back out in a couple hours. I promise you don't want to get to the finish line of this thing by having your perfectly risen and ready to bake boule ripped up by sticking to the mold. Personal experience there. Dust the bottom of your loaf, then cover and let sit for 2 hours. This is the final time we're going to let it rise. About 30 to 45 minutes before baking, put your baking vessel into the oven. In my case, it's a little stove Dutch oven. It could even be an inverted sheet tray and upside down bowl in a pinch. And then set the oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit. And hopefully your oven is not annoying like mine to set. Once we're at the 2-hour mark, it's time to bake. First thing, flip the dough out of the mold onto a piece of parchment paper. This is really handy to move the dough around with, both getting it into your baking vessel and out of it. And then we're gonna score it with a lame to create an ear. Excuse me, I mean lame. You're gonna wanna try and be a little smoother than me here. Confidence, I think that's probably what I was lacking here. And speed. And maybe overall technique. So anyway, go at a 45-degree angle, basically. Next, pull the Dutch oven out and lower the dough into it, cover and place it back into the oven. Immediately drop the temperature to 450 degrees Fahrenheit and set a timer for 25 minutes. After the time's up, remove the lid and you should have a risen but pale loaf. So you're going to want to keep baking that another 20 to 30 minutes or until you reach your desired color. For my oven, I tend to find myself on the upper end of that range, but I had to pull this loaf out at around 20-22 minutes because of a call I had to be on, and it's still nice and brown. And look at that, you got a pretty good looking loaf of bread. Is mine slightly misshapen? Sure. Could the ear have been cut in a little more, baked a bit more pronounced? Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, in about 3 days, you'll get another chance to keep perfecting those skills. And in the meantime, you have a loaf of bread that's honestly still going to taste better than 99% of the bread that you're going to buy at the grocery store. Yeah, so you're welcome. Anyway, until next time, like, subscribe, whatever it is you people do.